Father Cristino, welcome back.
Thank you.
Good to have you on a Friday again for our Lenten series here.
Yeah.
Today we're going to continue with our thoughts on fasting. We've spoke on self-denial. We've crept a little bit into fasting in our previous conversations, but let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into fasting. And to begin with, let's distinguish between two things, fasting and abstinence.
Right.
What are the differences?
Yeah, I think people equivocate those two words when I hear sometimes people talking about that they're fasting from X, Y, or Z. You don't fast from anything except for food. That is the strict definition of fasting. Abstinence means not doing something, and it can mean a wide range of things. In an election, you can abstain from voting. We talk about during Lent abstaining from meat, meaning that you don't eat meat on certain days of the week. In marital intimacy, couples can have what they call times of periodic abstinence in marriage, where they may not engage in intimacy. So abstinence is a much broader category, meaning choosing not to engage in or participate in something. Fasting has a much stricter definition that pertains to our intake of food specifically. And the reason behind that is because food is one of the most fundamental parts of what it means for us to be human, food and water. If you don't drink water, you're not going to live for very long. If you don't eat food, you'll live for longer, but you'll still eventually die. Our body needs to be fed. Our body needs nutrients. And so when we fast, we're taking something vitally important, literally vital, because we can't live without it, and saying, I'm going to deny myself the normal intake of this for the sake of actually letting myself feel the pain or the discomfort that one experiences when they don't have their normal intake of food. So we need to not flip the terms back and forth and think that anything that you're not doing, you can call that fasting from it. You're not fasting from it, you're abstaining from it.
Right.
Fasting has to do with what you're eating.
So traditionally, fasting always is sort of associated with food,
Yes.
restricting food in some way. Do you think that we should all practice fasting as part of our discipline in our life?
I absolutely think we should. I guess I should qualify all, because even the church in her laws about fasting defines ages. And so those who are required to fast on the two prescribed days of fasting in the church's calendar, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, only are required to do so if they have reached the age of 18 and are under the age of 60. Now, obviously, someone who is younger than 18 can still fast. They can choose to fast, or older than 60 can choose to fast. But the law that requires fasting from a Catholic on those 2 days of the year does not apply to people outside of those ages. And I think the idea there being children it's more difficult for them to function properly if their intake of food is disturbed. And maybe same once you're older. Maybe when you're older, it's already seen that you're taking medications at certain times, or that maybe you're diabetic, and so you have to be careful. And whatever the reason is, we realize that it's a lot to ask of a person to fast according to the strict definition of what fasting entails. And so we do restrict it, but anyone who should take it up.
Yeah, it reminds me of St. Bonaventure, echoed by St. Alphonsus Liguori, suggesting there's 3 ways to fast through quality, kind, and manner. Quality would be how much you eat, which is typically where our mind goes, but the kind and manner often aren't. And so the kind, what he refers to is, if you have food before you, it's not that you don't eat it, but you maybe take the worst, your less desirable piece of that food. Or you like ketchup on your burger, and it's a Thursday. You love it, but so now you're going to refrain from using ketchup. So that's kind. Or coffee, you like your coffee warm, hot. Well, you're going to choose to have it cold, and you don't like it that way. So do you think then in this respect, most people can work it into their life? And the reason why I'm saying this is I've always thought it's, in my mind, critically important for people to advance in the spiritual life to fast. If they can through quality, or the amount, quantity, then they can through kind and the manner. he says it's a secretive way, so people don't see it publicly. It's done, and so there's a humility with it. Because when I think of fasting, I think about Adam and Eve in the garden, and when they fell and lost their relationship with God, the great fall came through partially the palate. They ate something. So the fall of man was associated with something touching the taste buds. They tasted something. And from that, all disorder is connected to, well, initially the palate. And so we have all these disorders in our lives of the passions. And we think, well, how can I rein them in? My thought, well, go back to where it began, with the palate. Yes, there was pride. There was an act of disobedience, but it was also connected to the delight and the experience of tasting. And so I'll get your reaction, but I've never heard someone talk about it this way, but it's just like, if sin came this way, isn't there a great value to come against those passions, the lusts, the angers, the impatience, trying to figure out, well, how can I conquer this? Have you ever started with the palate? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely onto something. That in a certain sense, you could say that Adam and Eve's fall had to do with a disordered attachment to food. And what was disordered about it was that God had provided everything else for them, right? He said, you may eat of the fruit of all of these trees, except for this one. So he had put a restriction on the manner in which they could eat. And that provoked rebellion in them. The fact that they were somehow being restricted, somehow something was being held back from them, that began to provoke the questioning. And that's how Satan used that restriction to make them question God and his goodness and his generosity, which is mind-boggling to us now when we think about it. But we also have that same tendency. God blesses us in an abundance of ways, most of which we don't ever think of or acknowledge. And then if there's one way in which we feel not only not blessed, but maybe even punished, we become fixated on that. And so when we have a disordered attachment to something, the only way that we can put it into proper order is by freely choosing to deny it of ourselves somehow. And food is fundamental. You've had many children in your home. When a baby starts crying, the first thing that mom does is go to nurse him or her. Because you assume that the first thing that's the matter with them is that they're hungry. The minute that their stomach tells them that in their brain that it needs to be fed, they don't have any other way of communicating except to cry. And then as soon as they start to get that milk, they're happy. And usually that's all it takes to calm them down afterwards. If it doesn't, then okay, you start running through the other checklist. Do they need to be changed? Do they need to be swaddled? Whatever. We don't ever really break ourselves out of that tendency. We will continue throughout when you're a toddler and even up until whenever you finally learn some discipline that you can't just eat whatever you want when you want it. That's why parents are very careful about when they introduce sugar to their children. Because sugary foods, now that's the only thing they're going to want to eat. Anything else that doesn't taste like this, I don't want it then. Even, trying to get them to eat their vegetables before they start to have fruit, because the sweetness of that fruit is going to make them say they never want to have the vegetables, but we know that they need them. These are ways in which we try to train ourselves to have an ordered use of food. And because it's so abundant and it's just always there and around us, in our fortunate case, there are many people in the world for whom that is not the case. We have to train ourselves to have a disciplined approach towards it, because otherwise, left to our own devices, we will always have a disordered attachment to how and when and what we eat.
Focusing now specifically on Lent, floating on the internet, actually on the U.S. Bishop's website, there was fasting according to Pope Francis, and I want to read what he says regarding fasting. Fast from hurting words and say kind words. Fast from sadness and be filled with gratitude. Fast from anger and be filled with patience. Fast from pessimism and be filled with hope. Fast from worry and have trust in God. Fast from complaints and contemplate simplicity. Fast from pressure and be prayerful. Fast from bitterness and fill your hearts with joy. I think going back to our previous conversation, our earlier conversation, maybe a better word to say is, instead of fast, abstain. Because traditionally we understand fasting as from food. And I've seen this, and this is why I wanted to bring up this list, because people will use it as a justification for, well, I don't need to give up food this Lent because I'm fasting from bitterness.
Right.
And the problem with that mindset, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you fast from bitterness, well, you can pick it up after Lent's done. So I'm going to give it up for Lent, but then I'm going to pick it up after.
Right.
Where, no, you don't fast from sin. You shouldn't sin.
Right.
Because bitterness is sinful. It can be deep-seated in our life. Mm-hmm. So I think, to your point, and you weren't referring to this list, but now I am, it's a much better description to say abstain from these things. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we should use this list as a justification for, well, now I don't need to fast from food. So these are my thoughts.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, I don't mean to disregard or disagree with what the Holy Father's sentiments are there. He's clearly trying to say, how about you put away some of these things that you ought not have and take something in that void that you should have. That's the whole point behind all forms of self-denial, is that the void of the thing be filled with something that is superior. So that is fundamentally what he's getting at in that list. If you want to get into semantics, I think the wrong word is being used because, as I said, we fast from food, not from other things. And we certainly don't pat ourselves on the back for abstaining from sin. Some of the things on the list are sinful. Just don't do that. Put it away. You put it out of your life, you know?
Yeah.
We're not, that's not an option. Yes. We have to try and get rid of some of these things. So in Lent, if we think that I've given up a bad practice or a bad habit that I shouldn't have, well, that's good. And if Lent was the motivation for you to get rid of it, excellent. But to imagine that it therefore could replace other forms of self-denial that are either recommended or proposed or even prescribed for us, like the fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Mm-hmm. You cannot replace those things. And the fact that our Mother, the Church, only asks us to fast 2 days out of 365, I think suggests not much is being asked of us. And when not much is being asked of us, but what is being asked is important, the signal is we should be taking that up on our own. We should be trying to do that more for our own sake. In Exodus 90, as I've referred to earlier, I am grateful that one of the things that we are made to do is fast on Wednesdays and Fridays as part of the disciplines. And I know why. It's so funny. I might go on any day of the week until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon before I've put one morsel of food in my mouth, because I practice intermittent fasting, this new health crave where you don't eat in between a larger window of time and you restrict your eating to a narrower window of time in the daytime. And so I often will not eat until noon or 1 o'clock, but on a very busy day, I might go, as I said, until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm not even thinking about it. But then on days when I know I'm fasting, it's like the only thing I can think about. Oh, when am I going to get to eat that apple, my second meal that doesn't add up to a full meal when combined with my first non-meal? All I'm thinking about is food. And that is exactly why we need to fast. Because when we know we're doing that to ourselves, it's the only thing we want. And what fasting is supposed to help us do is only want God. That every hunger pang, every longing to satiate some craving in us, we would give over to our Lord and say, Lord, I want to be filled by you. I want to long this much for you. I want to be hungry for you. And train ourselves to translate our hunger for food into hunger for Him.
Mm-hmm. And some of these things on the list, I'll go back to it. I think, of course, there are wise things to practice, of course. I think that actually fasting would help us fulfill what's on that list. For example, bitterness. It'll help rein in the passions when we fast, and then because of that, then we'll be better equipped to deal with the bitterness and the ungratefulness. When you deny yourself food, it makes you more thankful for food. When you done, and even like when you fast, or to look at the other way, if you feast all the time, it's not really feasting. It's your norm of overconsumption. But the fact that you can fast allows you to feast.
Right.
We'll wrap it up here with this, but is there any closing comments that you have regarding fasting that you'd like to impart?
Well, I only just want to say that in Lent, we are preparing ourselves for the great feast of Easter. And to close off on the point that you just made, if we want to feast well at Easter time, as we should, we will not feast as well as we ought to have if we haven't been fasting leading up to it, because it won't feel like a feast at all. It'll feel just like any other day of the week, if that is what we're accustomed to having. And so if we want to experience the joy and that which makes Easter as special as it is, the best way to prepare for it is to deny ourselves what we're looking forward to enjoying as we celebrate our Lord's resurrection.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And please share with us below what stood out to you and why. Love learning from you, and always read your comments. And again, we'll close off with a prayer.
O Holy Mary, my mistress, into thy blessed trust and special keeping, into the bosom of thy tender mercy, this day, every day of my life, and at the hour of my death, I commend my soul and body. To thee I entrust all my hopes and consolations, all my trials and miseries, my life and the end of my life, that through thy most holy intercession and thy merits, all my actions may be ordered and disposed according to thy will and that of thy divine Son. Amen.